Welcome back, everyone, to yet another amazing, informative session as we continue the campaign, the virtual campaign called A Tree of Knowledge in aid of commemorating National Arbor Month this year. Today, I have the very special privilege of sharing with you guys someone that is quite the legend in the water sector. He is a father figure to so many young professionals in the sector. So please allow me to welcome Mr. Tony Bowers, who is an activist for process controllers and water treatment practitioners within the water services sector. He's also the technical director at Kaizen Water, if I'm saying it correctly, Group, and he's previously the director for Mpumalanga Water and Coal, and he's the interim national secretary for the Association for Water Treatment Practitioners. Mr. Bowers, welcome.
Thanks, Margo. Thank you very much. Welcome to your listeners.
I'm so excited to allow people to just have a little bit of insight. As mentioned, you are a legend in the water sector. You have years of knowledge and experience. So today we're just going to focus a little bit on some insight into the water sector as a whole. So I'm going to jump straight into it. With so many years of experience in the water sector, have we been able to eliminate fragmentation amongst the spheres of government regarding best practices in water resource management and best practices in water services management?
I think we have a certain degree of fragmentation in the water resource management area or the water service sector. However, I would admit that in terms of water resource management, I think Department of Water Affairs is well endowed in that particular area. The policies and the practices are very well coordinated. However, where the fragmentation comes in, it's between the water resource management, per se, and the implementation of services related to that. In other words, what we would like to see is that there is better management in terms of emerging contaminants coming into the water resource, and also the impact of climate change, which I generally like to refer as global warming, not climate change, because climate change basically, doesn't emphasize the impact of what is really happening at the ground level. So when it comes to water resource management, I think information is not being shared with all the stakeholders. The information is being shared among the scientists and amongst the engineers who have developed a sort of a reputation as being the custodians of water. But there's a special group that is being excluded. And those are the managers and the practitioners of water services. Because at the end of the day, they need to understand what are the hazards or the hazardous activities within the water resource management sector. And that information, I feel, is not really getting through those practitioners, which will help them then, because they are actually responsible for mitigating risks within the catchment. The department is not responsible for that portfolio. It is the custodian of water resource management. But when it comes to supplying safe drinking water, it's a different group. And I think the fragmentation comes in where that group, there's not sufficient communication with that group. And we need to improve on that. Also on a local level, we have two groups. We also have the environmental health and safety practitioners. However, I don't think they really understand it. They really understand their role in supporting local government regarding contamination within the water resources. The environmental inspectors, I think, is a type of encroachment where they want to duplicate the services of water treatment practitioners, and that then becomes a problem. They have to focus on what is polluting the environment, and then to take action to mitigate that pollution before the water is supplied to the practitioners to treat. Basically, that is my view on the question that you posed.
Okay, and then moving on to the next, Mr. Bowers, is water resource management protection being taken as seriously as the current crisis in terms of climate change?
Yeah, there are a lot of there are a lot of spook stories around that way. If people feel that you hear professors predicting that South Africa will run out of water.
Yeah.
In 2020. 2020 has come, but nothing has happened. But I think it's very important that we take the issues of global warming and resource management very seriously. In terms of the protection of the water resource, I don't think there's sufficient sense of the public is being sensitized sufficiently. One needs to, water is our only commodity, only the most important resource in South Africa, or actually in the world. And we need to start sensitizing people around water issues at the very grassroots level. That is in the schools, that is in the churches, that is wherever you can sensitize these people around this value source. Because the day that we don't have it, it's going to be disastrous. I mean, Cape Town came very close to that, of not having any water at all. One cannot imagine what could have happened if we reached day zero in Cape Town. So water protection, and I think people look at water resource protection differently. Water resource protection is not only in terms of water that is in a dam. It is in terms of how we manage our entire water cycle. You understand? And the water that we use, the wastewater that we use, that is also a resource. How are we managing that? Are we just pumping it into the river, getting rid of it? That needs to be harnessed, and that needs to be managed so that we use less of the natural water resource to prolong the life of that resource. But it's becoming more serious by the day.
Wow, what a insightful answer, Mr. Bowers. And then, in your opinion, once again, should we start separating water resource management and water services management functions? And then I'll have a follow-up to that afterwards.
Yeah, I don't think the two functions are virtually inseparable.
Yeah.
You cannot separate the one from the other. They have to work like, glove in hand. Water resource has its certain functions, and water services has its functions. Water services are entirely dependent on the management of the water resource. Therefore, the practitioners or the scientists and the engineers who do not manage a water resource is undoubtedly going to impact on water service delivery. So the two services cannot be isolated from one another. Yeah. The other thing is also, I think South Africa needs to be clear on exactly the skill set required for water resource management because of all the pollution that is coming into the river. Water service, on the other side, is also a critical function that treats the water to supply to the public. And there we also have a different skill set. You cannot have the same skill sets managing the resource and also supplying the water. It becomes then problematic.
Yeah. And then do you see an opportunity for change with regards to looking at those functions of both the water resource management as well as water services management?
Yes, there are opportunities for change where I think proper definition of roles needs to be clarified. So people know, you don't get people overlapping with one another and duplicating roles. The people or the practitioners managing the water, it must be clear what their functions are. Their functions are there to protect and develop and manage the resource. They are not there to treat the water or monitor those people treating the water. I think that is where we are having problems with people with resource management are starting to monitor people who treat the water. And it then becomes problematic. The skill sets for resource management are totally different because the different degrees and levels and variances of water pollution, you got point pollution and you got non-point pollution. These are enormous. And we need people to monitor those hazardous activities that are pumping contaminated water into the resource. However, if they are focused on monitoring people who are treating the water, it becomes, and they don't have the skills, actually, they don't understand they don't understand what is it about the treatment of water, but they're involved in that becomes problematic. So the two functions cannot be separated from one another, but what is important, they need to work very closely with one another. Resource managers need to inform the practitioners, the water service or treatment practitioners, what is in the water, so that the treatment practitioners can, because they are trained to remove what is in the water. So the resource manager needs to tell him, we found this in the water, and there are emerging contaminants. Most of these emerging contaminants are not regulated within the South African law. So resource managers need to monitor these contaminants coming into the water resource. So basically, to answer the question, Margot, you cannot separate the two from one another. They need to work hand in glove with one another. If they don't work hand in glove with one another, then it really becomes a problem and a risk for community health.
Yeah. Mr. Bowers, during this conversation, we're using the term water treatment practitioners, and there are so many young graduates, so many young professionals out there wanting to enter the sector. So in layman's terms, if I could ask it in that form, just what is a water treatment practitioner and what are some of the duties and functions that are taken up by a water treatment practitioner?
Thank you for asking that question, Margaret. It's a very broad term, but put in simple terms, water practitioners are people who are trained and educated to treat water in various forms. You get water from, you get fresh water, you get desalinated water, you get industrial water. So water treatment practitioners are trained to treat different types of water, applying different technologies. The water treatment practitioners, they undertake, before they treat the water, they undertake a risk assessment to determine exactly what is in the water, and then to apply the right technologies to remove those contaminants in the water in accordance with the standards, national health standards laid by the SANS 241. So water practitioners are basically there to treat water, and for different uses, it can be treat water it can be gray water just for recycling. It can be drinking water. Also, they may be involved in water harvesting, and they also treat groundwater or spring water. So practitioners are basically there, they apply their knowledge to treat water. My saying is always, we have civil engineers or process engineers. They design the technology. Water treatment practitioners apply the technology. So they are actually the drivers of the process, where the engineers are the designers of the process. So they work hand in hand with one another.
Wow, thank you so much. I think even for myself that's been working in the water sector, Mr. Bowers, understand just a little bit more about, the roles and the functions of these water treatment practitioners. And then moving on to the next part of our conversation, you yourself is considered an activist for process controllers. So just what are your views and thoughts around activism?
Yeah, that is a difficult question. based on our history as South Africa, coming out from our liberation struggle, the word activism is viewed as very negative. It is not easily accepted by the public because activists are they are drivers for aggressive political and social change.
Yeah.
That the word activism is associated with that. They are radical. So when people talk about activism, people sort of shy away from you. Oh, you're activist. You're very aggressive. You understand? Because that was the nature of our history. However, the other part of activism has not really been, it's not really discussed. And I generally refer that to, how can I say, it is passive activism. Now, if one really wants to, you want to achieve your objective, then one's got to, you move between two pillars of aggressive. It depends, you can make a choice whether you want to be involved in radical activism, like, the Greenpeaces, environment activists, the civil society, those guys, when they want political change and they want social change, they really go in for government, you understand? And they make their point quite clear. Yeah. On the other side, passive activism, one can generally refer that to advocacy groups. These are groups that they involved in on sympathy issues, and they drive their campaigns through volunteerism, through interest groups. They have empathy, or they show empathy towards certain interests, societal interests, but they are not aggressive. They use different tools to get their points across or to highlight their grievances. They may do this through lobbying government, engaging with government, having meetings, arranging workshops, capacity building initiative, education and training. So therefore, I don't know if we are, maybe I've got to look for a change, because I've attempted to use the word activism to get attention on the work that I'm trying to do. But however, I've picked up that South Africans are not taking very easily to the word activism. So one's got to look at rather moving over to word advocacy, or a lobbyist, and then promote it from that point of view. So yeah, that's so you get aggressive activism and you get passive activism. I'm in the latter group.
But also, we sort of had this conversation earlier on in the year when we sort of just hit the global pandemic at its peak. And I remember posting a Facebook status saying that from an environmental activist point of view, I was questioning our readiness in terms of the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yes.
And I remember tagging you and saying that I would love to get your insight on it. And I remember there was one point that you made as well, also through defining passive and aggressive activists. You also said that an activist is in all of us. It's a matter of taking a stand and voicing something that you believe in. And that was something that also just sat with me, and it's something that I use moving forward in my work. Is just believing that any one of us has the ability to advocate and stand for something. We just got a consistency and perseverance are just two things that also drives that forward.
No, that is quite correct, Morgan. I think all of us in society should be activists in some way. Now, you can elect whether you want to be aggressive or you want to be passive. You understand? Yeah. Passive, I think it's more cooperative and more, how can I say, you want to work with government, you don't want to be against government, you want to facilitate certain things, certain interest groups, I think. And that's why activism, but as you rightly pointed out, the word activism actually to be an active citizen. You can be an activist in the church, you can be an activist in any type of interest group, but what you're showing, you want to bring about change. And sometimes that change that you want to bring about can be in an aggressive way, and sometimes it can be in a cooperative way.
Definitely. And then, Mr. Bowers, moving on to the next part of the conversation, does society participate enough in issues regarding water? Example, the importance of Water Month. And do you think that society has become sensitized in aspects of saving water, just in terms of the impact of climate change?
No, I don't think society or the public is adequately sensitized regarding water issues. No, and that is very sad, because people expect water to come out of the tap, and only when the tap runs dry will they then complain. But as long as that tap runs, they got no complaints. We need to, and there's a saying, or there's a belief that the next wars in the world will be around water. Because our entire lives, our makeup, the human body is made about 60% of water. We can only survive approximately 3 to 4 days without water. We can survive 21 to 30 days without food. So water is a critical component of our lifestyle. And therefore, our children need to be educated, they need to be sensitized at the grassroots level regarding the importance of water. They need to also participate in the celebration of Water Month. So people and teachers need to tell them how important is this Water Month and why do we have Water Month. But I don't think that is happening. The education of water is not happening. I think the reason why people are not sensitized, and especially if you come to wastewater, sewage, which is also a water source, there's a stigma attached to it. You know, people don't want to be associated. If you are educated, you don't want to be associated with sewage. A lot of water practitioners I come across, their friends will ask them, "Where are you working?" "No, I'm working at the wastewater plant." "Jesus, what are you doing there?" "No, I'm a practitioner," but very little students or pupils don't understand that water resource management, or water, even wastewater, is a scientific operation. It's not a low class or unskilled operation. You need skills to manage and to transform water to a product that is less harmful. So Water Week needs to be sensitized and students need to be made aware of that at a grassroots level. Even a running tap, you go sometimes in your house, your tap is running, but nobody cares about that tap running. In the villages, nobody cares about that tap running until one day the tap runs dry forever. And only then will we realize the importance of that commodity. But then you only have 4 days left to survive.
That is so true, Mr. Bowers. And then the last question, just to summarize the conversation, as a long-standing professional within the water services sector, in your opinion, what does 2030 look like in terms of the availability of water and the sustainability of our water resources?
Difficult question. It's 10 years from now.
Around the corner.
It's around the corner, yeah. It's not far. As I highlighted earlier to you, you know, there've been a lot of doom stories in South Africa. We are a water scarce country. There's no doubt about that. And I don't think it's only 2030. I think it's 2021, 21, 22. Every year is a gloomy year. if we do not get our house in order, if we do not manage our water resources properly, it can even go beyond 30, but every year, because South Africa is a water scarce country, we have to treasure this resource in every aspect. And not only get engaged in predictions of what is going to happen in 2030, but what is going to happen tomorrow. I think that is the way we should approach our management of our water resource. What is going to happen tomorrow, and where are we going to get if, you know, there's the story that all risk managers ask, what if?
Yeah.
And if we do not ask what if, you know, we get a serious drought by next year, and that drought could go for 2 years, and you know 2 years is sufficient to cause a disaster. So we need to ask the question, what if? Where will we get our next water? Where are we going to get, if things go bad, where are we going to get our water from? And because of that what if story, or what if question, it is important that each and every South African understands the importance of this commodity in every aspect, and not only in terms of the management of that, in terms of the sustainability of its treatment. We need to train qualified people. We need to capacitate those people on how to treat this water and how to ensure that it's safe for drinking water supplies. We hear a lot of stories in the sector of in the industry where people appoint unqualified people to you know, to manage these complex and sophisticated water treatment works or sewage treatment works, and that is not a sustainable practice. We need to train our water treatment practitioners, and there needs to be a closer relationship between the research scientists, the engineers, and the water treatment practitioners. I think in many cases that gap between the science and the application of the science, I feel it's getting broader and broader. And somehow the scientists and the engineers need to come together and join hands with the water treatment practitioners regarding the challenges of water in the sector.
Mr. Bowers, thank you so much for just taking the time out of your day and allowing me to share. You know, I always say in the water sector, we can sit for hours in your company just learning from you and just having conversations like this that grooms us even further as young professionals within the water sector. And I'm so happy and excited to be able to just allow everybody else just a little bit of insight into that and share this knowledge with them. So thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Margot.
It's really
no, we are very proud of you, Margot, and we wish you all the best. Our hope is not aggressive activism. Our hope is passive activism.
It's very passive.
Your advocacy in bringing about change and awareness regarding environmental issues and water issues. We wish you all the best from our side, from the Association of Water Treatment Practitioners. We wish you the best in your endeavors, and we will always be there to support you.
And I'm so grateful for that, Mr. Bowers.
Thank you very much, Margot. Right.